They always said old men like me were predictable, easy to read, easy to discard. But the truth? I was the storm hiding in plain sight. And the first crack of thunder came the night my son told me I didn't own my own life anymore. It was late October in Fairfield, Ohio. Cold rain hammered the gutters of my house, the house I'd built with my own two hands 32 years ago. The living room smelled of wet coats and cheap whiskey. My son Daniel leaned back in my recliner like it belonged to him. His wife, Melissa, perched on the armrest, her painted nails tapping against his shoulder with a rhythm that grated in my skull. "Dad," Daniel started, swirling the ice in his glass, "we've decided it's time. You can't handle this house alone. You'll move into a retirement facility." Melissa already toured one. "Looks nice. 3 meals a day, nurses on call. Perfect for you." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I'd been eating leftover stew, alone until they barged in with their rehearsed smiles and plans for my exile. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice flat. "Retirement facility? That's not your decision." Melissa's laugh was soft, cruel. "You think you still get to decide? Daniel has power of attorney. You signed the papers last spring. Remember?" The spoon clattered into my bowl. I stared at her. Papers? Power of attorney? I never signed anything like that. But then it hit me. The day in March when Daniel shoved a stack of insurance renewals under my nose, talking fast about deadlines. I'd signed where he pointed, trusting my own blood. "You forged me," I whispered. "Relax, Dad," Daniel said, leaning forward. "This is for your good. We've already sold the house." The words detonated in my chest. My house, my land, gone. Melissa smirked. "Closing's next week. Buyers already wired the deposit. We'll use the money wisely. Investments. Maybe a vacation home in Florida. Somewhere sunny." I looked around the room, suddenly seeing it through foreign eyes. The pictures on the mantel, the worn rug, the old oak table scarred with decades of family dinners. All of it about to be stripped from me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that last year, when my health scare had everyone circling like vultures, I'd set up a trust. Quietly, legally, ironclad. And the trust held every real deed to this house, not the doctored one they were waving around. I chewed slowly, forcing calm into my bones. Let them think I was broken. Let them think they'd already won. Melissa leaned closer, her perfume sharp as vinegar. "You'll thank us one day, when you're sitting in a clean little room, watching TV, instead of rotting in this dump." I smiled then. Cold, measured, the kind of smile that made Melissa's tapping stop mid-beat. "Be careful what you build your future on," I said. "Sometimes the foundation isn't what it seems." They laughed, mocking, confident. But outside, thunder cracked so loud it shook the windows. And I knew. That was the sound of their world beginning to collapse. The next morning smelled of damp leaves and gasoline. My neighborhood in Fairfield looked quiet, ordinary, but inside my chest the storm from last night hadn't eased. Daniel's truck was already in my driveway when I woke. He was in the kitchen, rifling through my drawers as if he owned the place. Melissa sat at the table scrolling her phone, nails drumming on the surface, a pot of my coffee steaming in front of her like it was hers. "You should have been ready," Daniel said, slamming a drawer shut. "We need your financial records for the facility paperwork." Facility. The word again, sour as bile. I pulled on my boots, ignoring him. Going out. He stepped in front of me, jaw tight. "Where?" I met his stare, steady. "Hardware store. You break one more drawer, I'll need nails." Melissa snorted. "Oh, relax. He's harmless." They thought so. That was the beauty of it. I drove across town, not to the hardware store, but to the brick office on Lincoln Avenue. The one with frosted glass windows and no sign out front. Inside, the air smelled of paper and ink. My lawyer, Richard Connolly, looked up from his desk, his steel gray hair neatly combed. "You were right," I said, dropping into the chair. They're circling. Richard tapped a folder already waiting for me. I anticipated this. The trust is intact. Title's locked. They can't sell a brick of that house without your consent. I opened the folder. Copies of the real deed. The trust agreement. And then, the surprise I'd almost forgotten about. Richard slid across a photograph. Grainy. Black and white. Melissa, outside a bank, shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. Private investigator found this last week, Richard said. Melissa's been meeting with a property developer from Cincinnati. Name's Wexler. He's been buying distressed properties cheap, then flipping them. Guess whose house he's after? My stomach turned. So it wasn't just Daniel's betrayal. Melissa was playing her own game. She's not just after your house, Richard added. She's after control of Daniel too. Every move she makes, she documents under his name. When this blows up, he'll be left holding the bag. I sat back, breath slow, the weight of revelation heavy but clarifying. My son thought he was leading this coup. He didn't realize he was just a pawn in his wife's scheme. Richard's voice lowered. Do you want me to act now? I shook my head. Not yet. Let her keep digging the hole. The deeper she goes, the harder she'll fall. On my way home, the autumn sky split with sunlight, but my house loomed darker than ever. Through the front window, I saw Daniel pacing, phone pressed to his ear. Melissa watched from the couch, a cat with her prey in a cage. I parked the truck, heart steady. Tonight, I'd start the first step, showing Daniel just enough truth to make him doubt the woman at his side. Because once cracks spread between them, their whole scheme would collapse, and I'd be the one pulling the strings. The air inside my house had shifted. I could feel it the moment I stepped back through the door that afternoon. The warmth was gone, replaced by something tense, metallic, like the air before a storm. Daniel was at the dining table with papers spread out, his laptop open, the glow turning his face pale. Melissa perched nearby, her eyes darting between me and the screen like a hawk waiting for a signal. You've got mail, Dad, Daniel said without looking up. His tone was clipped, managerial. Retirement home needs your medical records. Melissa's already filled out most of it for you. You just need to sign. I walked past them into the kitchen, poured myself coffee that wasn't even hot anymore, and leaned against the counter. The walls felt close, heavy. I studied my son, the boy I'd once taught to ride a bike, the boy whose hands I'd bandaged after he cut them on a chain-link fence. Now those hands were poised over a keyboard, erasing me from my own life. Sign, Melissa said sharply. The sooner it's done, the sooner this transition will be easier for all of us. I sipped the bitter coffee, let silence stretch, then set the cup down with a deliberate thud. You sure about that transition? Daniel finally looked at me. What's that supposed to mean? I walked slowly to the table, fingers brushing the papers. Their neat lines, boxes, blank spaces waiting for my signature. A trap dressed up as a form. I saw something today, I said, voice even. A picture. You and a man outside First Federal, Melissa. You shook his hand. Wexler, isn't it? Her smile cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. Daniel's head whipped toward her. What's he talking about? Melissa recovered fast, her laugh thin. He's confused, Daniel. You know how. I cut her off. Don't insult me. You think I don't recognize a developer when I see one? That man's been buying up half of Cincinnati. And you're selling him my house behind your husband's back. The room froze. The sound of the refrigerator humming filled the silence. Daniel's face went red, then white. Melissa? Her eyes narrowed. He's bluffing. I leaned in close, lowered my voice until Daniel had to strain to hear. Am I? Because I have the photo. And if I do, you know who else does. Melissa stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Don't listen to him. He's trying to divide us. But Daniel's hands were trembling now. The laptop screen reflected in his eyes, spreadsheets, sale agreements, emails. Probably her doing. Probably all under his name. Divide us, I said, voice cold as stone. Melissa, you've already done that. He thinks you're building a future together. You're building an escape hatch." Her jaw tightened. "You old bastard." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "Enough." His voice cracked like a whip. Papers fluttered to the floor. He turned to me, eyes searching, desperate. "If you've got proof, show me." I straightened, calm as ever. "Not yet. Proof is about timing. And timing isn't on your side, son." Melissa spun toward him. "You can't possibly believe him. He's manipulating you." But I saw it, the seed of doubt taking root in Daniel's mind. He looked at her the way a man looks at a stranger, blinking, trying to reconcile the woman beside him with the truth seeping through the cracks. I gathered the fallen papers, stacked them neatly, then pushed them back across the table. "You want me in a retirement home? Fine. But remember this. Houses built on lies don't stand for long. You'll see." I left them in the kitchen, their whispers sharp, frantic, hissing behind me like snakes. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and sat in the dark. My heart pounded steady, controlled. The first strike had landed. I didn't need them to trust me. I just needed them to stop trusting each other. From the window, I watched the streetlights flicker on. Melissa stormed out to her car an hour later, tires screeching on wet pavement. Daniel stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped, phone glowing in his hand but unanswered. Good. Let him stew in doubt. Let him wonder if the woman he married was digging his grave. On my nightstand lay a small black recorder, the one I'd used years ago when handling disputes at the factory. I slid it into my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd let Melissa talk herself into a corner. People like her always did. And when the recording hit Daniel's ears, the fragile alliance they built against me would shatter completely. The morning air tasted like metal, sharp and cold. I let the radiator tick in the corner, that old clanging sound drilling into my patience. On the table lay a thick manila folder, a rubber band cutting into its sides, a yellow post-it slapped on top. Bank, beneficiary updates. Inside, nothing but blank forms. And a recorder, its red eye blinking steady. Melissa padded into the kitchen in slippers, robe tied tight, like armor. She saw the folder, tried not to look, then slid it toward herself as if she were just tidying up. The post-it disappeared into her hand. Seconds later, her phone slid out of her pocket. She thought she was clever. She slipped into the mudroom, door half shut. But this house carries sound like a gossiping neighbor. "Yeah," she whispered, flat voice. "He's still here. No, he didn't sign last night. Listen, Daniel is shaky. We need a clean close before he grows a spine." A pause. "The POA they filed in March covers us. Title company won't check signatures. You said the deposit's in? Good. Use his name. He'll never trace it." The recorder blinked, silent and patient. My hand stayed steady. At 9, I drove to Lincoln Avenue. Richard was already waiting, 2 cups of coffee and a mountain of paper. "Affidavit of forgery," he said, tapping the first page. "Notice of interest. Emergency injunction. All filed this morning." And he slid another paper across. "Protective Services referral. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's clinical. Judges like clinical." I signed each line, pen scratching concrete into place. Then Richard lowered his voice. PI dug deeper into Briar Hill. "It's a Delaware shell. Beneficial owner, Kingsley Funding." "Never heard of them," I said. "You have," Richard answered. "You funded them. 10 years ago. Equipment loan for Daniel's first startup. Shell never dissolved. Manager of record." He turned the page. "You." For a moment, the hallway tilted. My own son had tried to sell my house to a company I technically still controlled. I laughed once. Sharp hollow. File it all. By noon, the storm had teeth. The title officer called first. "Mr. Hale, we've placed a hold on file 14-0829 pending resolution of fraud claims." 5 minutes later, Daniel's voice exploded through the phone. "What the hell did you do?" "The adult thing," I said. "I told the truth." "You blew up the closing." "No, you did, when you forged my name." Behind him, I heard Melissa hissing, slamming drawers. Then another voice, smooth as oil. Wexler. This is Wexler. We can fix this if everyone stays reasonable. Great, I said. Go be reasonable somewhere else. He chuckled. You don't want to fight with me. Then don't start one on my porch. I hung up. By mid-afternoon, the banker arrived in a navy blazer, tablet clutched like a shield. Mr. Hale, unusual activity flagged on your property line. A $98,000 draw attempted to Briar Hill. Our fraud system matched your alert. We froze the account. Daniel stormed onto the porch. That's my line. It's secured by this property, she said. And this property is in a trust with a no encumbrance clause. Legally, it's his line. She nodded at me. Melissa's face turned stone. You'll regret this, she hissed at me when the banker left. I made tea I didn't drink. Steam fogged the window. Melissa slid into the kitchen, close enough for me to see her mascara. Erase that recording, she whispered. You don't want a war with me. Stop acting like an occupying army, I said. She smiled thin and sharp. We filed for emergency guardianship this morning. Doctor's letter says you're impaired. For a clock hearing. By dinner, I'll decide whether you eat at home or in a ward. My pulse drummed hard, but my voice stayed cold. Good. Then you'll enjoy the hearing. Her brow flicked. What hearing? The one Richard filed an hour ago. On the forgery. On exploitation. If we share a courtroom, you can lie twice. The doorbell split the air. Two men stood outside. One in a suit with a leather portfolio. The other in a deputy's jacket, badge gleaming. A second cruiser idled at the curb. Another deputy approached with papers. Temporary guardianship order, the first deputy said. Melissa Hale, petitioner. Authorizes removal to a facility. Melissa's smile went sugar-sweet. Thank you, officer. But the second deputy lifted his own paper. Restraining order in favor of Mr. Hale. Enjoins transfer, encumbrance, and removal. Signed 15 minutes ago. The deputies looked at each other. Rain started to needle down. Then Richard's call lit my phone. I answered on speaker. Don't let anyone touch you, he said. We got her alias. Melissa Morgan is really Alyssa Finn. 2 open fraud investigations in neighboring counties. Both judges now have the file. Wexler's smirk flickered. Melissa froze. And just then, brakes screeched on gravel. A white van rolled in, cheerful logo painted on the side. A nurse stepped out, clipboard ready, voice soft as sugar. Mr. Hale, we're here to take you for evaluation. 2 orders. 2 deputies. 1 van. Rain pounding like fists on the roof. I set my teacup down, porcelain against wood without a sound. Tell me, I asked the deputies, calm as death, which judge do you plan to disobey first? The van's engine hummed low, a predator circling its prey. Rain streaked the windows in crooked lines, smearing the deputies' reflections. Melissa clutched her guardianship order, like it was a crown, lips trembling with fake sweetness. Wexler shifted beside her, tapping his leather portfolio as if he already owned the house. But the second deputy still held my order, signed in real ink by a real judge. The 2 men locked eyes, confusion sparking between them like crossed wires. Which paper carried more weight? Which voice would they obey? I leaned against the doorframe, steady as stone. So, I said, my tone sharp enough to cut the rain in half. Which of you wants to gamble your badge today? Silence. The nurse from the van shuffled her clipboard nervously. We really should proceed with the evaluation. Step 1 foot inside this house, I interrupted, and you'll be part of a contempt charge before sundown. Richard already filed it. Her eyes darted to the deputies. They didn't move. Melissa's mask cracked for the first time. Her smile twitched, then froze in place like plaster. This is a misunderstanding. The judge knows he's impaired. We've prepared documentation. Prepared, I echoed. That's the right word. Too prepared. Fake signatures, recycled letterhead. You should have checked which notary's license expired 3 years ago. Wexler's smirk vanished. His eyes flickered, calculating. And then, headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan rolled slow up the driveway, engine low, tinted glass. The kind of car that didn't belong in our quiet cul-de-sac. My stomach turned cold steel. The sedan door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, clean suit, umbrella snapping open like a blade. Not police. Not medical. A courier. He carried a single envelope, sealed in red wax. "Delivery for Mr. Hale," he said, voice calm, almost reverent. Melissa rushed forward. "That's for me." He ignored her, handed it directly to me. The wax cracked beneath my thumb. Inside, a single page. Black letterhead. Kingsley Funding. I read the first line and felt the air shift. Notice of beneficial ownership transfer. Effective immediately. My hand stayed steady, but my pulse thudded against my ribs. They weren't just trying to sell the house. They'd already moved to transfer my company shares. The shell corporation Daniel thought I'd forgotten about was no longer mine on paper. Someone had filed it at 9:02 a.m. Melissa's voice pitched high, shrill. "That's impossible. He doesn't even know what Kingsley is." But she was wrong. I knew exactly what it was. And I knew what they'd just triggered. Behind me, the recorder's red light blinked. Still running. Every word since sunrise burned onto that little chip. I looked at the deputies, at the van, at my son standing behind Melissa, pale as chalk. "You all wanted a war," I said softly. "Congratulations. You just bought one." I stepped back inside, phone already in my hand. Richard's number waited at the top. The rain hammered the roof, relentless and wild, as if the whole house knew a storm bigger than weather had just broken loose. Melissa opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, my line connected. "Richard," I said, my voice sharp and cold as winter glass. They pulled the trigger. Kingsley's filed the transfer. And Richard's reply cut through the chaos like a blade. "Good. Then they've walked straight into our trap." The phone went dead, but Richard's last words echoed in my skull like a gunshot. "They've walked straight into our trap." I sat there, staring at the rain-smeared window, while the van outside idled nervously. Melissa was whispering frantically to the deputies. Wexler had pulled out his phone, and my son, God help him, just stood frozen, pale, realizing for the first time that maybe he had no idea what game was being played. Because it wasn't a game anymore. It was war. Richard called back within minutes. "Listen carefully. Kingsley Funding wasn't just a shell, it was a baited hook. When they pushed that ownership transfer, they triggered automatic alerts to the state attorney's office. Corporate fraud division. We're talking forged signatures, backdated filings. They've crossed into criminal territory." I smiled, a slow, cold smile that felt carved into my face. Melissa thought she was about to parade me off to some padded room. Wexler thought he was about to grab a fat commission. Instead, they just handed me a weapon sharp enough to cut all of them open in court. I glanced at Melissa. She was still arguing with the deputies, insisting they act on her paper, trying to drown their doubts with volume. Her voice rose, shrill, desperate. That's when I stepped outside, rain soaking my shirt, and said, "Melissa, you ever wonder why the notary on your order lives in Arizona now? Or why his commission expired in 2021? You should have checked. You walked in here with a dead man's stamp. And now the state knows." Her face collapsed. She looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Wexler cursed under his breath, already typing fast on his phone, probably trying to figure out if his name was on the filings. It was. Richard had made sure of it. The deputies exchanged a glance. One of them folded my order back into his pocket like it was gospel. The other muttered something about needing to report this up. The chain of command was turning against them, inch by inch. But the real storm hadn't even broken yet. The sedan courier hadn't left. He was still there, standing in the rain with his umbrella like some damned messenger from another world. And then, calmly, he reached into his coat and pulled out another envelope. "For Mrs. Hale," he said. Melissa grabbed it with shaking hands. Tore it open. I watched her lips move as she read. Her eyes darted over the page, then widened. She looked at me like I had planned the entire universe against her. And maybe I had. What is it? Wexler snapped. Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. They froze the accounts. Every one of them. The deputies stiffened. Even they knew what that meant. The money trail, the real one, was locked, sealed, and about to be dissected under a microscope. You set us up, Melissa hissed, rain dripping off her chin. No, I said. You set yourselves up. I just built the mousetrap. Lightning cracked in the distance, cutting the sky open. For a moment, the whole yard was white. And in that flash, I saw the truth settle over them. Melissa's little empire was crumbling, Wexler's career was ash, and my son, my foolish, greedy son, was chained to their sinking ship. But the night wasn't done twisting the knife. Because while they stood there breaking apart, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Richard. One sentence only. Check your garage. Now. I froze. My garage. I pushed past them, ignoring Melissa's protests, ignoring the deputies who half-heartedly told me to stop. The door groaned open, and the smell hit me first. Oil, metal, something acrid. And then I saw it. The safe. The small fireproof one I kept bolted in the corner. Its door was ajar. Papers spilled across the concrete floor like someone had ripped its guts out. Not someone. My son. And on top of the mess, plain as day, sat a forged deed. Property transfer. My house. Signed in my handwriting, but shaky wrong. Daniel had already tried to steal it. Days ago. The deputies crowded behind me now, staring. Melissa's protests died in her throat. Wexler swore again, louder this time. But me? I just bent down, picked up that forged deed, and held it up in the dim garage light. You want to know the difference between me and you? I asked softly. You steal with arrogance. I wait. I watch. And when I strike, I drop the paper back onto the floor. The rain hammered the roof like applause. I don't miss. Behind me, one of the deputies finally reached for his radio. Melissa tried to grab his arm, but he shook her off. Wexler backed toward the van, face tight, like he was calculating whether to run. And Daniel, my son, he couldn't even meet my eyes. The storm outside roared louder, drowning the silence between us. But I didn't need his words. His guilt was already carved into every line of his face. They thought tonight was about locking me away. Instead, it had become the night I ripped their schemes wide open. And this was only the beginning. The courthouse clock struck 10 when I stepped inside. Marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the echo of my boots followed me through the atrium. People shuffled past with papers clutched like life rafts, whispering to lawyers, hurrying to hearings. For me, this wasn't chaos. It was a battlefield. Richard met me near the elevators, tie loosened, briefcase heavy with ammunition. His eyes burned with the fire of someone who smelled blood. They triggered Kingsley, he said without preamble. I saw the papers myself. My voice was ice. They think they've taken my company. He almost smiled. Except Kingsley was never your company. Not really. Not on record. I leaned closer. Explain. Richard slid a file into my hands, crisp and thick. You sold beneficial ownership 10 years ago to a holding group in Delaware. You remember? My jaw tightened. I remember the paperwork. But I also remember it was a shell, set up to protect assets if anyone came after me. Exactly. Richard tapped the file. The transfer they filed this morning doesn't give them ownership. It just activated a clause that voids their rights. By trying to steal it, they lost everything. The elevator doors opened, revealing polished brass and silence. I stepped inside with Richard at my side. So Melissa and Daniel think they're walking into court with power. Richard's lips curved into something dangerous. They're walking into their own execution. When the doors opened again, the tension was thicker than courthouse air had a right to be. Melissa stood outside courtroom 3, pearls gleaming against her neck. Daniel hovered at her shoulder, pale but stubborn, like a child clinging to a broken toy. Wexler, their smug lawyer, shuffled papers theatrically. Dad. Daniel said, voice trembling but defiant. You don't belong here. I stepped into his space, close enough to see his pulse jump in his neck. I belong everywhere my name is written, and you've spent the last 6 months trying to erase it. Melissa jumped in, sugary venom dripping from every word. This doesn't have to get ugly. Sign over your consent. Let the guardianship proceed quietly, and we can still find you a place to live out your days with dignity. I laughed. Short, sharp, humorless. You think dignity comes from your approval? You threw that word out when you forged court papers. Wexler adjusted his glasses, voice smooth like oil. Mr. Hale, these accusations are baseless. The court will see through your theatrics. Richard cut him off. The court will see through forged signatures, expired notary stamps, and illegal transfers. Evidence is already filed under seal. For the first time, Melissa's face twitched. Just a crack, but enough. The bailiff called us inside. The courtroom was wood and silence, the kind that swallowed nerves whole. Judge Abernathy sat high above, gavel ready. Eyes sharper than most gave him credit for. We took our seats. Melissa's heels clicked against the floor as if she could drill her authority into the wood. Daniel sat rigid, sweat beading at his temple. Abernathy's gaze landed on me first. Mr. Hale, you filed a motion to dismiss this guardianship petition. On what grounds? Richard rose, sliding exhibits across the clerk's desk. On grounds of fraud, Your Honor. We have evidence of falsified medical evaluations, forged signatures, and most recently, an unauthorized transfer of beneficial ownership. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Melissa's face drained of color. Daniel's jaw worked soundlessly. Wexler tried to recover. Your Honor, these claims are absurd. My clients acted only out of concern for Mr. Hale's well-being. Richard's voice cut like a blade. Concern? Then explain why they filed ownership transfer documents at 9:02 this morning, minutes before this hearing. Documents that triggered a dormant clause. Abernathy lifted his brows. Clause. Richard gestured to me. Perhaps Mr. Hale should explain. He drafted it. All eyes turned to me. The courtroom air felt electric, heavy with anticipation. I rose slowly, every movement deliberate. 10 years ago, I created Kingsley as a safeguard. Any attempt to transfer its assets without my direct consent would dissolve the company entirely. No assets, no shares, nothing left to steal. Silence. Pure, stunned silence. Melissa finally found her voice. You can't do that. I leaned forward on the table, locking eyes with her. I already did. This morning, your greed erased everything you thought you controlled. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. You tricked us. No, I said coldly. You tricked yourselves. The judge's gavel cracked. Enough. I'll review the evidence. But as of now, the petition for guardianship is suspended. Court adjourned until further notice. The room erupted. Lawyers whispering, reporters scribbling, the gallery buzzing like a kicked hive. Melissa stormed past me, nails digging into Daniel's arm. Wexler muttered something about appeals, but his voice lacked conviction. As they disappeared through the heavy wooden doors, I caught Melissa's last look. Hatred, raw and desperate. Not defeat. Not yet. Richard touched my arm. You realize this won't stop them. They've lost the company, but they'll come for whatever else they think is left. I know. My voice was steady, even calm. And that's exactly what I want. Outside, rain had started again. Cold, hard drops hitting the courthouse steps like gunfire. I pulled my coat tighter, watching Melissa's car peel out of the parking lot. They thought today was the end of my story. They were wrong. It was only the beginning of theirs. And I would be the one writing every brutal chapter. The phone in my hand buzzed again. Emily's name lit up the screen for the 10th time. Her perfect reception was collapsing piece by piece, just like I'd planned. And finally, I answered, Dad, you've ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice was frantic, splintering under pressure. I leaned back in my chair, watching the rain streak down the garage window. Correction, Emily. I haven't ruined anything. I've simply stopped paying for illusions. Silence on the line. Then a sob. Please, people are leaving. Michael's parents are furious. His father says this marriage is already a disaster. You have to fix this. Fix it. I let the word hang in the air. Emily, when was the last time you even looked me in the eyes and said thank you? You took and took and took, and then when I showed up today, you threw me out like trash. I didn't mean it like that, she whispered, desperation dripping from every syllable. Dad, please. I'll make it right. Just give me one more chance. But I'd heard that voice before. The little girl asking for ice cream money. The teenager demanding a new car. The college student begging for another wire transfer. The woman who now wanted me erased from her perfect world. Your chance ended at that ballroom door, I said coldly. Enjoy explaining to your new husband's family why the entire wedding crumbled in less than an hour. Through the line I could hear shouting in the background. Michael's sharp voice, accusing, his parents demanding answers, guests muttering as vendors packed their things. The empire she'd tried to build on my money was turning to dust around her, and she knew it. Daddy, please, she tried again, but this time I ended the call. The silence in my garage was heavy. My phone buzzed again almost instantly, but I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my desk drawer, pulled out the folder I'd been keeping for years, financial records, deeds, ownership papers. Every account, every property, every investment that had built the fortune Emily thought was hers by right. Her entire wedding had been financed from my construction company's accounts. But the truth was bigger. I hadn't just funded her big day. I owned the very venue she was standing in. Purchased it years ago under a holding company name she'd never recognized. She'd thrown me out of a building with my name on the deed. I allowed myself a grim smile. The irony was perfect. By 7 p.m., calls came not from Emily but from lawyers, venue managers, even Michael himself. I let them all ring. I didn't need to argue. They'd figure it out soon enough when the invoices landed. Payable in full, no refunds, no exceptions. By 9 p.m., Emily finally left me a voicemail, her voice raw. Dad, I made a mistake. Please, I don't care about the flowers or the food. I just want you back. Please come. But it was too late. Too many years of entitlement. Too many nights I'd eaten cold dinners so she could have her dream life. Too many times I'd told myself she'd eventually see me, not just my money. I turned off the phone. The next morning, headlines did the work for me. Local heiress's wedding collapses as vendors pull services. Scandal at the Anderson reception. Unpaid bills spark chaos. Michael's political family couldn't stomach the humiliation. Within a week, their engagement dissolved in a mess of public accusations. Emily called again and again, each message smaller, more broken, until finally there was only silence. And me? I went back to work. Not construction. I'd sold the company years ago, quietly investing in real estate. Properties she never knew I owned. Businesses she never cared to ask about. I wasn't ruined. I wasn't discarded. She was. As I stood in my office weeks later, watching new tenants move into one of my downtown buildings, I realized something. Love without gratitude is nothing but debt. And debt, sooner or later, always comes due. Emily thought she buried me at the door of her wedding. But in truth, I buried her that night, with her own arrogance as the shovel. And as for me, I finally felt free. The last tie was cut. I didn't lose a daughter that day. I finally reclaimed my life. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and stay with me for more stories ahead.